This is Brian Kemple of Continuum Philosophical Insight, and today we're going to take 15 minutes to consider the meaningful use of words. Before you say, "Who is this Brian jerk, and why should we care what he has to say about anything?" I've included links to my bio below, where you can find my CV, and lots of other information about me and the things I think and do, if you want to click around my website and look at all the various pages there. That's where you can find out who this Brian jerk is and decide for yourself, if you need to decide, whether you should care about what I have to say. Now, it is a widespread problem today, I believe, more widespread probably than any time in recent memory, that we human beings, especially in the Western world, take it for granted that we have knowledge of a great many things, or at the very least, a knowledge sufficient for talking meaningfully about those things. As one clear sign that this presupposition is problematic, consider whether most people, perhaps including yourself, can articulate clearly the meaning of the word meaning. No doubt you and everyone else who uses the word possesses some sense as to what it signifies, but it is doubtful that you and everyone else will think of the same things, or come up with the same answers as to what meaning means. Now, this disparity in our thinking follows from the words meaning and meaningful being put to a variety of different, although related uses in our everyday language. I think we can get a much better grasp on what we mean by meaning, and unravel some of the confusion, if we briefly examine these uses and take a moment to consider how they are related. As a consequence of this reflection, we should further improve our general ability to use words meaningfully, and therefore be better enabled to talk meaningfully about the world in which we live. Now, when we speak of meaning, typically we intend one or more of three possible senses. First, we may intend the intelligibility of some being independent of what anyone might happen to think about it. This is the kind of meaning that we're after when we talk, or when we ask what something means, or what something is. Second, we may intend the referential, that is, meaning as it comes to exist in the relationship between any two things, at least one of which is a cognitive agent, such that what a dove means to a human is not the same as what it means to a dog, and a crucifix has a meaning different for a Catholic than it does for a Buddhist or an atheist. This sense of meaning is always circumscribed by the environment in which the relationship between the cognitive agent and the object comes into being. Third, and finally, we may intend the importance or purpose of an object, as when we ask someone why an item is meaningful for him or her. This sense of meaning is usually tied to the pursuit of fulfillment in life. Now, respectively, I call these three senses the intelligible sense, the referential sense, and the teleological sense of meaning. The word teleological coming from the Greek word telos, which means end or purpose or goal. And notably, all three senses of meaning are interconnected. That is, the teleological is derived from either the referential or the intelligible, or both, and how we comport ourselves within the referential depends upon our belief about its relationship to the intelligible. While all the many nuances of these three senses and their relations are too complex for this kind of brief presentation, the most important question to ask for helping us to use our words meaningfully is the question of primacy. That is, which sense of meaning grounds all the others? Which sense of meaning is the most fundamental? Today, I think it's the unconscious presupposition of many, and the explicit claim of some, that intelligible meaning is a fiction, and that all meaning is always and only referential, such that the teleological sense of meaning is merely a subset of meaning by referentiality. In other words, according to this view, nothing has meaning, independently of the meaning it is granted by reference to a cognitive agent, and all meaning subsists in those relationships and only in those relationships. Therefore, there is only the dove as meaningful to a dog, or the dove as meaningful to a human, and no meaning of the dove independent of these and other such references. What the dove is in and of itself is at best inaccessible, and more likely to talk of the meaning of the dove in and of itself is nonsensical. Now, in some ways, the origin of this view might be ascribed to Martin Heidegger, the 20th century philosopher and phenomenologist, who, working off the ideas of the 19th century theoretical biologist Jakob von Uexküll, wrote of how human beings always exist in a world, and worlds are always constituted by relations. But I think this ascription, well, it's true that Heidegger says this, misses the more fundamental point that Heidegger was attempting to unveil about the worldhood of the human world. Namely, that while we exist in a world constituted by referentiality, the questions we ask and the meanings we seek are not constrained to considering only how things stand in reference to us. In other words, the very nature of our reference to other things is innately expansive, so as to include reference to the intelligible meaning of our objects above and beyond our own present interpretation of them. This is the purpose of the phenomenological method that Heidegger developed, and which I will be discussing in an upcoming seminar, and you can see the link below if you're interested in that. Now, regardless of what previous scholars or thinkers have had to say on the question, and this scholarship is very informative and should not be ignored, we have to consider what Heidegger says, but also what Husserl says, and Charles Peirce, and Lady Victoria Welby, who are some very prominent writers, even if not yet recognized entirely. Lady Welby, for one, certainly. Prominent writers on the meaning of meaning. We really should read them, but that's a very systematic and time-consuming pursuit. Regardless of what these others have had to say, we ought, in this moment right now, to ask ourselves, can we truly know what a thing is, outside of its reference to us, outside of its contextual interpretation, which is driven by our self-interested pursuits? I believe the answer is yes, because the object's reference to us includes its being intelligible as what it is in itself. We do live in a world constituted by referentiality, but because of the kind of being that we are, a being, that is, which is capable of recognizing that how a thing appears to us does not exhaust what that thing is in itself, we are potentially unlimited in how we may incorporate objects of reference. In other words, our referential sphere is not limited by our nature or by our natural interests. In fact, our natural interests are illimitable. And this lack of limitation results in an inversion of the relationship between merely referential meaning, which is a grasp of meaning common to all animals, and intelligible meaning, which is a grasp unique to human beings. The only meaning that objects have for non-human animals is their meaning as subordinated to the interests of those animals, and thus the referentiality is limited by the particular apparent goods that those animals seek. Human beings, on the other hand, because we can grasp that there are meanings of things in themselves, and therefore we can realize that there are disparities between what appears good for us and what is actually good for us, for instance, results in a subordination of referential meaning to intelligible meaning. This is a pretty difficult concept to process, and I think if you find yourself experiencing a knee-jerk disagreement, which you very well might, I would invite you to ask why. What are the beliefs you hold that are causing your objection? They might be very good objections, and they might be very sound beliefs, and I invite you to cordially leave them in the comments. But to give a final word, so to speak, I believe that much of our contemporary struggle with using words meaningfully is a consequence of the implicitly appropriated belief that referential meaning is the primary sense of meaning for human beings. That is, having lost, if it was ever really truly had, having lost the sense of intelligible meaning as primary, we have lost the ability to truly get at what things are with our words. And only by recovering this sense can we recover the ability to communicate meaningfully. I think this lack of a grasp of intelligible meaning, or of the primacy of intelligible meaning, not only does this come from various relativisms and subjective philosophies, but it also comes from an implicit and unconsciously appropriated nominalism. This belief that there are no natural kinds in the world, but only particulars, only individuals, and any kind or universal, which is to say a pattern of relations, is a fiction that we create for ourselves to make more easily categorizable the objects of our experience. This is it's a very old theory, nominalism. It goes back to the 12th century at the very latest. Nominalism has been around for forever, and really all modern philosophies, even though they may not say so explicitly, have an implicit nominalism in their basic presuppositions. And this has bled into our society at large, such that referentiality has unconsciously become the dominant way in which we try to consider the meaning of things. It comes up in our conversation or in the way that we talk about things. What does this mean to you? How do you interpret this? What do you think about this? What do you feel about this? Such that we're putting the bulk of what we mean by the meaning, in those cases, in the individual agents themselves who are thinking about things. And as a consequence, we tend to treat meaning of things as almost a function of intersubjective agreement. Right? That we agree that these things, or that these words, mean what we say they mean, simply because we agree on them. And while it's true that all words, all language is by some convention, that convention shouldn't be just that I agree about the reference of this and you agree about the reference of this, that what it means to you is the same as what it means to me, but should actually be striving to get at the things themselves, should be striving to understand the things in terms of the causes of those things, which is more than just the antecedent chronological events which came before and seem to have resulted in the effect coming after, but understanding the formal causes and the material causes and extrinsic formal causes and internal formal causes, final causes, and so on and so forth. I talk about that a bit in the Introduction to Principles book that I have. I think that this slide into the conventional and the purely conventional mode of language is evidenced by things like the dictionary. You look up a word in the dictionary, and there's a good chance that the words used to define it are going to, when you look up them, ultimately lead you in a complete circle, so that the word you initially looked up is a part of a definition of some words that you've searched in the definition of the word that you looked up. And so our meaning kind of becomes this product of a social web, right, of conventional agreement about how we ought to interpret things, rather than getting to the things themselves. So thank you for your time, for subscribing, and just generally for being willing to last 15 minutes in entertaining and weighing the thoughts that I'm trying to share with this project.